In a previous episode, we discussed the likelihood of a fourth industrial revolution. Since then, we've seen a lot of headlines around supply chain issues and never before seen price rises. So should we now be questioning whether an industrial revolution is even possible? In our view, it is possible, but not without help from things like automation. And that's why I'm here in this GXO logistics warehouse in Leicestershire, England. And joining me to tell me why this is being termed the warehouse of the future is Neil Shelton, their Group Strategic Officer. Thanks for joining us, Neil.
Welcome to GXO East Midlands.
Thank you. And can you tell us what specifically in this warehouse is different from a traditional warehouse?
Most warehouses are manual. In fact, only 5% of warehouses are automated. If you look at the flow of products through this warehouse, in excess of 90% is undertaken by automation. And we're not putting in automation for art's sake. This is to solve for our customers' problems. The automation here has driven a 60% reduction in variable costs per unit. It's helped our customers' volumes to grow by in excess of 100%, and it's driven an extraordinary 99.99% precision. So diverting potential for waste away from their customers. And that's why we're automating sites.
Great. So to add some context, what sort of solutions is automation providing?
Generally, the problems we solve for our customers are firstly along the lines of efficiency. But I think the bigger benefits are really for our customers in terms of inventory and stock management, especially in e-commerce. And then lastly, predictability. You mentioned about the unpredictable supply chains. Warehousing can be that bastion of predictability. It's important. We're the last people to touch a product before it goes into the delivery channel to the consumer. The consumer expects a best-in-class experience. And at the same time too, deploying automation can allow, in an environment where the cost of labour, the availability of labour is less certain, a much more predictable solution. So it allows our customers to, if you like, build a supply chain around predictability.
So as demand increases for automation, should we be worried about our jobs? Are we about to lose our jobs to robots?
No, not at all. At GXO, in the fourth quarter of last year, we hired 20,000 new people across our group. And that's to meet surging demand for warehousing activities. Think of the shift from the e-commerce channel. Before, what an awful lot of that was done in a retail store is now being done in a warehouse. And we're employing collaborative technologies to deal with that. So robots that work with people. So no, robots are not going to replace people. We will continue hiring at GXO.
Thanks, Neil. So that's given us a real insight into how they're using automation here at this GXO logistics warehouse. But I'd like to broaden that out to understand what this means for investors, and also how could it provide a solution to some of those unsettling headlines. Let's take a look.
Donald Trump wins the presidency.
Political instability, trade wars and a global pandemic, a backdrop creating the need for more resilient supply chains.
In recent years, the pandemic, the resulting supply chain challenges and geopolitical events have led businesses to reconsider their operations. The current long, complex and globalised supply chain structure isn't working. Companies are focusing more on agility, resilience and sustainability and less on cost and profitability.
83% of sectors which depend on overseas supply chains are now considering moving production closer to home.
Last week, Nando's closed some branches after running out of chicken, and KFC also warned recently that supply chain issues meant some dishes were off the menu.
Britain's economic recovery is being held back by labour shortages. The latest to highlight them, the big business group, the CBI, which reports gaps from farmers' fields to shop and factory floors.
Some companies we talk to are moving from just-in-time to just-in-case inventory management. This is a way of driving product availability for the customer, and the companies are using this as a way of driving market share gains. A really easy way of doing this is moving production closer to end demand. It reduces your lead time, and it also reduces your dependence on the supply chains.
Availability of workers is an important consideration for reshoring. As production moves to local areas, there is pressure on the limitation of workers available. something many companies already struggled with during the restrictions of the pandemic.
If the UK economy is to manoeuvre through the supply chain crisis, it's going to need people like Adam. Retraining as an HGV driver, the most in-demand job in business.
Automation can be a solution to that, with a high percentage of jobs now automatable. But what does this mean for human workers?
Worries that robots replace workers lack a huge amount of nuance. When you look at the data, the truth is that an enormous amount of opportunities are created at the high-skilled, high-salaried end of the spectrum. Innovation and productivity growth really creates that level of opportunity, but there is an incumbence on investors and companies to make sure that the policies and reskilling initiatives are sufficient to ensure that as automation progresses, we do see that just transition. One example of this is cobots, where you have people working alongside machines in a way that really augments the capabilities of both humans and machines.
Introducing automation into traditional settings can increase productivity and yields. So it's unsurprising that automation has seen the largest growth rate year to date for decades. Companies are seeing a much faster return on investments. So for most, the CapEx taps have now been turned on.
Automation is providing solutions across the whole supply chain, but it's not just limited to logistics. It's now relevant to most industries, and that's why I'd like to take a closer look at the impacts that it's having on the food and water industries.
56% of people in the UK have noticed shortages at their local supermarket.
Developments in automation in the food industry have been born out of necessity as much as technological advancements. Automation provides solutions to ongoing supply chain issues and labour shortages, but key to the food industry, it can enhance yields. By 2030, the population will have grown to 11 billion, making it more important than ever to increase the food and water supply.
6 months of record-breaking temperatures have fueled massive forest fires in the Siberian Arctic this year. That weather has had serious impacts. Farmers need seasonally appropriate temperatures to get their crops to grow properly.
When we look at this huge task that we have, that's sort of producing 70% more food over the next 30 years, there's really a couple of key levers that we have that relate to automation. The first that we really think about is this idea of actually being able to adjust for seasonal variation. So, technologies like vertical farming, like actually being able to print grass, or even cultured meat where you can produce protein in these vats, all of that starts to reduce the kind of waste in the system that you get from these seasonal fluctuations. The second lever is actually even more simple, and that's really the idea that at the moment only about 40% of all agricultural land is irrigated, and on average irrigating land doubles that yield. So again, if we can automate the way in which we're delivering water to plants and to crops, that massively helps that challenge. And the final point really is around things like minimizing the distance between where food is being produced and actually being consumed, because at the moment around about a third of all food is wasted at some point in the value chain. So again, if we can do that through things like vertical farming that we have even here in London with sort of higher margin crops, all of that really helps us to bridge that gap that we need to do.
Crops like corn and wheat have been automated for decades. New robotics are now being developed to do the often backbreaking work of fruit and vegetable farming. Take this automated lettuce harvester at Taylor Farms.
Automation can mitigate risks associated with farming, but it can also enhance traditional farming processes.
John Deere is a pioneer in what they call precision agriculture. The idea is you take data from the field, analyse and measure it, and come up with solutions for the farmer to drive increasing crop yields. They're actually coming out with autonomous and advanced machinery combining sensors, camera and advanced machine learning to drive up the yields, but at the same time they're able to reduce input use for the farmer. For instance, the latest iteration of an advanced sprayer claims to reduce herbicide use by 77%.
Precision farming is one way that automation protects the environment. But 80% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the supply chain. So more broadly, improvements to the supply chain can help to reduce the carbon footprint of any company. In fact, some companies are recording up to 20% energy reduction through the use of automation.
Automation was once confined to car manufacturing. But the good news for investors is that it's now creating opportunities across all industries. And the other good news is that it looks like robots work in harmony with humans, so we're not fighting for our jobs just yet. Thanks for watching.